the media is dying. The mainstream media and these ridiculously untrustworthy outlets are going down left and right to the point where we need to talk about it. So just today, Business Insider announced it's laying off 8% of its staff, which is considerable. The Washington Post just had massive layoffs. The LA Times announced a huge round of layoffs earlier this week, one of the most severe in the newspaper's 142-year history. CNN's reporting that it was 115 journalists, more than 20% of the newsroom got the axe. Sports Illustrated essentially closed its doors last week. And I could keep going. All of this led to, this is like a legit problem. I think I mean, with all due respect to those who lost their jobs, I have empathy for them, but I do think the collapse of the mainstream media is not bad. It's just desserts for the way they cover the news. But it's led to some meltdowns by people who still think that they're at the top of the influence cycle and don't want to see any sort of consequences for the way these outlets have covered the news over the past few years, which brings me, just for a little sampling, to Taylor Lorenz, who switched from her COVID hysteria for a day to media hysteria. A lot of what she says, not all, a lot of what she says here is true, but just take a listen.
The journalism industry is basically in a free fall. Today, the Los Angeles Times laid off 115 employees. But what's really dark is this is just the latest in months and months and months of layoffs in the media industry. In fact, tens of thousands of journalists have been laid off in the past year. Pretty much the entire digital media ecosystem that myself and a lot of other millennial journalists came up in has been completely hollowed out. And it's not just digital media sites. Local news has been obliterated. The newspaper industry is cratering. Radio is essentially dead aside from NPR, which has been gutted. Even mainstream national media outlets owned by billionaires like the Washington Post, where I work, and the Atlantic, where I used to work, have done layoffs. If you're a young journalist today, there's almost no on-ramp to traditional journalism. Even if you do get a job, journalists' salaries have been stagnant and even declined. And by the way, we don't make that much to begin with. I don't think people understand how bad the world would be without journalists.
Well, I love it. My favorite part of it is radio, aside from NPR, is dead. Like, no clue that there is a huge and thriving right-wing radio ecosystem. SiriusXM thriving. We're not close to closing our doors like some of the outlets that right? So it's like, if Taylor doesn't listen to it, she's with WAPO, it doesn't exist, Andrew. But the larger zoomed out look is media is hurting. It's endangered, and there's a very good reason for it. Your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly right. I mean, I too hate to laugh at other people's misfortune, but I just can't help it. I mean, my show, my podcast, on Friday is entitled "Die Sports Illustrated Die." I'm a real sports fan, a big NFL fan. I loved Sports Illustrated. 5 years ago, I publicly canceled my subscription, so publicly that they actually had to go on Hugh Hewitt's show to defend themselves, but they couldn't defend themselves except by attacking me. The reason was that at some moment, the thought enters these people's head that their reason for being journalists is not to report the news. Their reason for being movie makers is not to make movies. The reason for being TV people is not to entertain us. No, it's to teach us their higher, superior reality and teach us why we are not deserving until we raise ourselves to their moral standards. Sports Illustrated, which 10, 15 years ago was still a terrific venue to find out about sports, started preaching A, about how George W. Bush was a terrible president, but B, about how God was a terrible God. This was what caused me to cancel my subscription. I don't care if you hate God. I don't care if you attack God. I care if you attack God when you're supposed to be telling me the score of the game. That was your job. Your job was to tell me about football. And they started to tell me how these idiot sports guys are praying before a game and how awful that was. And Drew Brees was talking about faith. What could he possibly mean by that? It was just absurd. They moved on from that because you do move on from that. It is logical once you get rid of God to get rid of all human standards, because all human standards are based on our sense of reality, our sense of a spiritual reality, as well as a physical reality. So once you get rid of God, all standards are gone. So now they start putting on the annual, swimsuit thing, which was basically a cheap sex thrill that they would send out to sports fans, and you could look at very beautiful girls in very skimpy bathing suits. And suddenly they put an overweight model on the front, and we're supposed to all say, "Oh, now thank you for teaching us," instead of looking at a beautiful girl in a swimsuit, which is why I'm here. Now you are now teaching me that I have to really look at fat people in a new way. And Jordan Peterson is being re-educated, because God knows the one thing Jordan Peterson is lacking is education. I mean, read a book, Jordan. He's being re-educated because he said, it's not pretty. You're not pretty if you're so fat that you're pouring out of your bikini. Nobody wants to be mean. Nobody wants to pick on people, but you force people into this situation. And the way the left has done this is by violating any human standard. They force us to push back and say, no, a man can't become a woman. No, a gay marriage is not the same as a marriage between a man and a woman. And then they get to call us bad guys. They get to call us bigots. And so once again, it's this idea that if you don't accept their complete distortion of reality, their complete reversal of the moral order, you are the bad guy. And so watching them fall down, especially I love watching the New York Times. These are the small pleasures of life, Megyn. I love watching the New York Times cover these things without mentioning the woke factor. Sports Illustrated is dying because it went woke. The LA Times is dying because it's woke. That's why Washington Post is dying too. They're not dying because the internet was invented. They're dying because they don't tell the truth. And they don't tell the truth about anything, even the most basic things in life that we know, like a man can't become a woman. I mean, that just happens to be the most obvious one, but all of the things that they say and all of their standards are not human standards. They're not the standards that have upheld us for thousands and thousands of years. They're just nonsense. And so people are turning them off, and they deserve it. And it's hard not to celebrate.
It is. Just a quick note. There was a reporter for The Guardian who tweeted out, a woman who tweeted out something to the effect of, there's no women actually believe that the trans thing is impossible. All real women are allies to the trans community. There's just a couple hundred transphobes who claim to speak for women who are out there causing problems. And then it was great because, of course, Twitter just unloaded on this reporter like, you are so clueless. You have no idea what you're talking about, right? Like, because again, just like Taylor Lorenz, if I don't see it, it doesn't exist. If I don't listen to anything other than NPR, it must not be out there. Like, I guess Sean Hannity failed in radio. Okay, keep telling yourself that, Taylor. I guess Howard Stern, he's not getting any, okay. It's like, there's a whole ecosystem that you might not be tapped into. So anyway, the LA Times is a great example of this. Their headlines that people have pulled in the wake of their layoffs are absolutely stunning. I didn't realize how bad it was. And I was reminded, first of all, one of the people who got laid off was Jean Guerrero, who is the person who wrote the Larry Elder is a white supremacist article. Remember Larry Elder, who's black, just in case the audience doesn't know that. He was running for governor at the time to take down Gavin Newsom. And she thought it would be great to write a column about how he's the black face of white supremacy. As she gets fired, she wants us to know, I was the only Latina columnist for the opinion desk. Oh no, the only Latina on the opinion desk. Well, that should save you. I mean, you're a Latinx, so I guess you can't go. But anyway, so a couple of the LA Times headlines were absolutely disgusting, as were the Washington Post's. Hold on, I'm pulling, LA Times. Gonna read you a couple. Okay. White drivers are polluting the air breathed by LA's people of color. Look at this. This is courtesy of ex-user Kristen Mag. Editorial, bring on the crackdown. The unvaccinated must be held accountable. Another one, column, mocking anti-vaxxers' COVID deaths is ghoulish, yes, but may be necessary. They wonder why they're going out of business slowly but surely, Andrew. I'm sorry to mock their deaths, but I have to.
That's the thing. That headline especially struck me because I thought, I feel the same way about you guys. And it is, in one way, the opinion page, I suppose you have to give them a little latitude on the opinion page. But really, when you start to call Larry Elder the black face of white supremacy, it's just clear that you are a babbling idiot who never leaves his room. And that what you said before is exactly it. The great weakness, and I've been pointing this out for years, the great weakness of the media, the leftist takeover of the media, is that it put them in the position where they could not hear what everybody else was saying. They literally could not hear that people were laughing at them. It always reminded me of like that scene in Singing in the Rain, where they open the curtain and you find out the real singer is standing behind the woman mouthing the words. We found out that the left was standing behind the media, telling them what to say, and they didn't know the curtain was open. And so it was really a design flaw in their takeover of the culture that it caused them not to hear the people. So what do they have to do? They have to complain that the problem is Elon Musk letting the far right, people who don't believe that their children should be trans or queered, the people who believe in what people have believed for thousands and thousands of years, those are the people that are the problem, and not letting them speak will solve the problem. And I just think it has gone beyond that. It is exactly what the Catholic Church tried to do when they invented the printing press. It is the exact same thing. It is, no, we are going to be in control of what translations of the Bible people read, what opinions people read. And if you don't go along with those opinions, we're going to burn you at the stake. I don't think so. Didn't work then. Isn't going to work now. This flow of information is the most important subject. Obama and the rest who want to shut it down are absolutely right about that. That is the fight we're in. But I just don't see how they win it without crushing people. And crushing people is not a good look for the free West. It has never really worked in the West. Every time you do it, the country falls apart. The fact is when you oppress people, you can't both oppress people and have a free market. This is what China is finding out right now. People who told us, China is the future. I used to shake my head and say, how do you have a free market without free people? You can't do it. Free people are who create ideas. Ideas are not created in the government. They're created by guys in their garage who then get rich and forget that the next guy who's going to create the next idea is in his garage right now. And then they start to shut things down. You just can't hold on to power in the same way in a free, bubbling, creative society. And if you do hold on to power, all that free, bubbling creativity that makes you rich goes away. That's the choice you have to make. And people have made the same choice in the West for centuries, which is we want to be free. This information is everything. It is the definition of the problem we have, but it's also the definition of the solution. The more voices, the better. And the more these voices who have tried to shut everybody else down, the more they are silenced, the better for everybody.
The pressure to conform to political correctness has undeniably suppressed genuine debate, and it's time we put a stop to it. Enter Freedom 2.0. I love this. Listen to this. It's a bottled water company, an unapologetic one that proudly supports the freedom to speak, to think, and to listen. We can't afford to remain silent anymore. It's crucial to make our support for the First Amendment crystal clear. And one impactful way to do so is by choosing products from companies that share our values. Visit freedom20.com and use the code MK for a 15% discount when you get there, to stand with me and millions of other Americans in celebrating the right to free speech. Remember, freedom is not inherited. It's something we must actively fight for. So raise your voice, grab your bottle of Freedom 2.0 and make a statement. Cheers to Freedom 2.0. That's Freedom 2.0, like the letter O, not Freedom 2.0 when you're typing it in. And champion the power of free speech. Hey, thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.